Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Just before you get married, find out your wife is cheating on you? Today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. Emily Henson was the woman I was going to marry. We met shortly after I moved from Santa Barbara to Tempe, Arizona, to work there. This was after 4 years in the U.S. Army and another 4 years at UCLA, where I received my BS in computer science and several certifications. I also moved there to be closer to my parents, who had relocated to Scottsdale. Being a UCLA graduate was sometimes difficult due to the proximity to ASU, but what can you do? It happens. My best friend Lena stayed in Santa Barbara, and we kept in touch regularly, that is, until my new girlfriend Emily told me to limit it. As it turns out, Emily was jealous because I had a female best friend. She told me that I needed to talk less to Lena and spend more time with her. I should have seen the warning signs about Emily, to be honest, but damn, she was hot and sweet most of the time, and I fell in love with her. So, of course, I didn't tell her about what happened between Lena and me before we met. By the way, my name is Mitchell Nolan. I am 185 centimeters tall, weigh 90 kilograms, and am still in shape after leaving the Army in 1995. After 4 years of service, I still went for morning runs at least 3 times a week to stay fit. Paratrooper, sniper, and ranger school drilled into my head the need to keep myself in shape. Yes, I kept myself in shape even while studying for a computer science degree at UCLA, using the GI Bill and student loans. Hell, I even still wore my dog tags. It was the summer of 2000 when I first met Emily Henson. I had just moved to town and went to visit my parents in Scottsdale. Her mom was a friend of my mom's, and we hit it off right away. Even though I don't usually like blondes, Emily won my heart with her bright green eyes, honey blonde hair, sweet personality, and cute smile. She had just graduated from ASU, but I didn't hold that against her. Anyone who follows college football in the American Southwest knows about the rivalry between UCLA and ASU. It's obvious, but that doesn't matter now. Yes, I quickly fell in love with Emily. We dated for a little over a year and then started living together. It was a real whirlwind of romance, but it seemed like we really hit it off, although she didn't like hard rock, action movies, or science fiction. Yes, we were very compatible in bed, and I sometimes listened to her favorite music, country and western. I was young and naive. What can I say? Back then, I thought amazing intimacy was the most important thing in a relationship. Today, I recognize that it is important, but not as important as I thought then. However, a little over a year into our relationship, and right after my proposal to her, the tragedy of September 11th occurred, and the entire country stopped for several days until the powerful men in Washington figured out what was happening and came up with a plan of action. The vision of a plane crashing into the second tower inspired me, and I contacted the Phoenix Army recruiting office to inquire about re-enlisting. Emily didn't want me to go, and when I called Lena, she didn't want me to come back either. I thought that at least Lena would understand, considering that we were together in Panama during my first tour of duty. I was an infantryman, and she was a military police officer. She made some compelling arguments. I was no longer 18 years old, hell, I was 28 when 9/11 happened. It had been 10 years since our first trip to the recruiting office, but I was determined. She screamed at me for about 15 minutes, saying that this war would end badly and that I would die there. At the end of our last conversation, Lena gave me an ultimatum. She said, "Mitch, if you come back, I'll never talk to you again." I hung up. Yes, I'm stubborn. Emily was more supportive than my best friend. At least Emily said she understood that I needed to do it. To make a long story short, I returned to the service. At that moment, I thought I was sacrificing a long friendship to serve my country in a time of war. As much as Lena was wrong, it was justified. I easily passed basic training, and paratrooper, sniper, and ranger school again. Okay, that last one was a lie. I did it, but no one goes through sniper and ranger school easily. When I first served, I spent most of my time in Panama with the 1st Battalion, 508th Airborne Regiment, and then the 587th Infantry Regiment. After the 587th was inactivated, this time I was assigned to the 2nd Ranger Battalion at Fort Lewis, Washington. I was deployed in 2002 to Afghanistan, then served in Iraq, and then returned to Afghanistan for my final tour of duty. Whenever I could, I took time off to go home to Emily. I missed her terribly while I was abroad, and I thought she missed me too. She said yes and was very affectionate and passionate when I was at home. Hell, if I hadn't taken a bullet to the knee almost 4 months before my return date, I would never have known that back home, everything was not as it seemed. Jim Harper was one of my friends when I moved to the area. We worked together in the IT department of a company where we were both busy, and Emily and I sometimes went on double dates with Jim and his girlfriend, Cher Lewis. Jim told me the second time I left for basic training at Fort Benning that he would look after Emily for me. I shook his hand and thanked him for it. Hell, he was engaged to Cher at the time, so I had no reason not to trust him. Now that I was hurt, I didn't tell Emily about it. Stupid, I know. I didn't want her to worry about me. Yes, now I know that was a mistake. When I got out of Walter Reed and ETS was at Fort Jackson, I decided to surprise her because I came out 3 weeks ahead of schedule. I was given medical leave due to my knee and still walk with a barely noticeable limp. Damn, it'll probably be like this for the rest of my life. I can still run, although months of physical therapy have helped quite a bit. So, I flew home and landed at Sky Harbor 3 weeks and 1 day early. Instead of calling a friend or family member to pick me up, I took a taxi. I planned to make a big surprise for everyone. As I loaded up my bag and paid the taxi driver, I noticed Jim's car parked next to my '79 Camaro in the complex parking lot. I smiled at his battered, rebuilt Datsun Taurus. Damn Ford owner, if it's not a Mustang, then the Ford is useless. The Mustang is the only Ford model I like, otherwise, I'm pro Chevy. I wondered what he could be doing here, but I figured he might be helping her with something she needed. I guess I was basically right. Thinking that I would surprise both my friend and my girlfriend at the same time, I went to my door and quietly inserted the key into the lock. Even as I turned the doorknob and opened the door, I knew something was wrong. Heavy breathing could be heard coming from our bedroom, and clothes were strewn across the living room and down the hallway. My first thought was, strange. Remembering it now, I thought, they must have planned a practical joke for me. But how did they know that I would come so soon? Stupid, right? Yes, at that moment, I was dumber than a bowling alley. So I chuckled and walked down the hallway towards our bedroom. When I opened the door, half expecting them to yell, "Surprise!" at me, instead, I saw something that made my blood boil. I stood there in shock as I watched my ex-friend having an intimate with my ex-fiancée. When the shock passed, the anger returned with renewed vigor. Hell, I don't even remember what I was thinking when I moved forward and took 2 steps before hitting Jim from behind with my boot. At that moment, Emily noticed me and tried to cover herself by screaming, "Baby, it's not what you think. Why are you home?" Oh God, I'm so sorry. At least that's what it sounded like to me. She was talking so fast. I wasn't interested in excuses. I just looked at her and said, "Shut up." I walked over and grabbed Jim by the hair. My only thought at that moment was to throw this scum out of my house. Now, I'm not a giant, but I am pretty built. The physical therapy for my knee was tough, but at least my arm strength didn't suffer. In fact, holding the bars made my arms even stronger, and I trained them constantly. So, with a slight limp, I was able to drag this idiot into the living room, open the front door, pick him up, and throw his worthless 5th place onto the grass in front of my house. I slammed the door and went back for the traitor who was once my fiancée. Emily was crying when I returned to the bedroom, covering herself as best she could with the sheets. I tore the sheet off her and let her out after her lover, doing so without hesitation or doubt. Before I opened the front door, I reached down, grabbed her left hand, pulled the ring off her finger, and threw her out like trash. As soon as she was outside, I slammed the door and locked it. Then, I looked around the apartment, and my heart broke as the adrenaline began to subside. I staggered over to the sofa and collapsed on it. I gasped and cried simultaneously when I realized the full scale of what had happened. "Jesus," I whispered, "what did I do wrong?" After some time, I don't know how long, a minute, 10 minutes, half an hour, the devil knows, God knows if I remember, I stood up and trudged to the door. I should have looked through the peephole, but in the state I was in, I had no time for that. I thought it was either Jim or Emily, or both of them, knocking on the door to get their clothes. To hell with them, I thought. Let them run around without clothes, I don't care. So, with righteous anger in my eyes, I opened the door to find a Tempe police officer. "Are you Mitchell Nolan?" he asked. "Why me?" I answered woodenly. "This lady here claims that you threw her out of her apartment along with the man sitting next to her." "Is that true?" he asked. In response, I looked over and saw Emily sitting on the edge of the ambulance while the paramedics tended to Jim. "That's partly true, but she doesn't live here anymore and was never on the lease. Legally speaking, this is my apartment. My name is on the lease, not hers. She's my ex-fiancé, and he's my ex-friend, if that matters. They no longer have any right to be in my apartment," I growled. "Well, Mr. Nolan, we need to know what happened here. Either you can answer our questions here, or we can go to the station," he said. "Now, I've dealt with enough military police and police officers to know when they're trying to put pressure on me. They expect you to give in immediately and do whatever they say. I didn't intend to do that." "Okay, Officer Smith," I said, reading his badge. "I just returned from Afghanistan after a 3-month stint at Walter Reed. On my way home, I wanted to surprise my fiancée and get home a little early. But as you can see from the way they were dressed, the surprise was on me. I then decided to revoke her privilege to live here, not to mention his privilege to visit, and evicted them from the premises." The cop looked up at his clipboard and nodded, writing down my statement. "Okay, Mr. Nolan. Could you at least give them back their clothes?" "Of course, officer." "Glad to help," I said with a hint of sarcasm. I asked him to wait and went to collect the things they were wearing before deciding to have an intim on my bed. Then I brought the package to the door and handed everything over to the officer. "Here, officer." "Ah, one moment," I said, taking Emily's jeans and pulling out the keys I found. I took the key to her apartment off the keychain and handed it over to Officer Smith. "Thanks, but we might want to ask you questions later," he said, retreating with a full load of clothing. "No problem, officer. Always happy to help. Tell her to wait a minute, and I'll get the rest of her things ready." With those words and a quick smile, I closed the door, locked it, and then went and collected some trash bags. It took me less than 5 minutes to throw out everything that was in Emily's dresser, on her side of the closet, and the toiletries on her side of our sink and tub. I could tell Smith was surprised when I opened the door so quickly after that and dumped the bags onto the porch. "Here you go, Emily. Don't come back. Don't call. We're done," I shouted to her, seeing her face streaked with tears as she begged me not to do what I was doing. Well, okay, I thought. She should have thought about this before she took my ex-friend, who was already married to Sure, into bed. I felt bad for Sure, but then I realized she needed to know about this whole mess. I took my cell phone out of my pocket and dialed her number as I slammed and locked the door again. She answered on the second ring. "Oh my God, Mitch, are you home?" she asked, hope in her voice. "Yes, Sherry. Turns out I was a much better friend than old Jimbo. Actually, I arrived this morning. Unfortunately, I have some bad news about Jim and Emily," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "What do you mean, bad news, honey?" she asked, her tone full of apprehension. "Well, they're not dead, if that's what you're worried about. Unfortunately, I just walked in on your husband in bed with my fiancée." "I'm sorry, Sherry. I had no idea until I surprised them," I said. I then told her all about how I kicked them out without anything and about the police coming. Now, some of you might be wondering why I wasn't arrested. You see, Arizona is a sovereign property rights state, which includes tenants' rights to the apartments. I fully complied with my rights by removing the trash since my name was the only name on the lease. I never got around to adding Emily's name, so she had no more rights to be here than what I gave her. I also had the right to revoke her guest status at any time and for any reason. "So, it's all over between you two?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She knew how I felt and understood the meaning of the words exclusivity and engagement. That is, she was mine and I was hers, no one else. I cannot and will not take her back. "I'm so sorry about all of this," Sherry said. She cried a little but found the strength to speak after a couple of minutes. "I can't believe he did this to me, to us." She was close to screaming into the phone. "I'm sorry, Mitch. I know you have no reason to lie to me. I'm going to have a long talk with that idiot when he gets home." "Well, it might have been an isolated incident," I shrugged. "I don't know about you, but I can't trust Emily anymore. That is, if she did this before we were even married." I let my voice trail off, feeling another lump in my throat. "I understand, dear," she said. "I'll go now. I have something to do before Jim gets back." "I'm sorry it was him and Emily." "I know you were friends," I said. "Yes." "Where's the key?" she snorted. "Okay, Sherry. I'll go." "Take care of yourself," I said. "Okay, honey. And you too." With that, she ended the call. Before she could end the call, my phone rang again with Emily's number. I ignored it and turned off the phone. I had just fallen onto the couch when the landline phone started ringing. I looked at the caller ID, and sure enough, it was Emily again. Why do cheaters always want to talk after they've been caught? Why do they want to try to explain things that cannot be explained or justified? I reached over and unplugged the phone from the socket, then went back into the bedroom and turned off that phone too. The last person I wanted to talk to at this time was Emily. Once that was done, I went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Miracle of miracles, at least my friend didn't drink my beer. I still had almost a full pack from my last vacation a month earlier when I took the bullet. I pulled out Beck's dark beer and drank it in large gulps. I then took another and drank it more slowly as I collapsed back onto the couch. My brain was experiencing all the emotional storm that accompanies such betrayal. Emily wasn't the first to leave me or cheat on me, but her betrayal was the most painful. The previous cheater was the girl I was supposed to go to prom with before I took Lena instead. I could deal with breakups. After Bridget cheated on me and left me, at least Lena and I supported each other, and we fell in love. Things don't work out the way they do in fictional stories, however. She got engaged to some guy after we finished our first tour of duty, and although their relationship didn't last long, by the time they broke up, I was already with Emily. Our agreement remained the same. We weren't supposed to be more than best friends if one or both of us were in a relationship with someone else. I wanted more than just to call Lena and talk to her. I wanted to do more than just go to the mall or to an afternoon movie with her. I needed my best friend, but her last words kept echoing in my head. The finality of what she said stayed with me. I hated her at that moment. I hated Emily at that moment. Most of all, I hated myself. The fact that I was stupid again and pushed my best friend away when I needed her most was terrifying to me. How could I be so stupidly inattentive? Instead of explaining my reasoning to her and asking for advice, I simply told her what I was going to do. She tried to dissuade me, but I stupidly said, "Well, I'm going. I need it." At least Emily said she understood, of course, but then who knows, maybe she has already cheated on me with Jim behind my back. At that moment, I began to rethink our entire relationship. I started to reinvent myself and reconsider everything in my life. What did I do wrong? I asked myself again and again. Yes, 6 beers later, and I was a complete wreck. Almost 2 full combat tours in Afghanistan, plus 1 in Iraq, never giving in under pressure, and I came home to find my fiancé in my bed with another man, a man who was supposed to be my friend, and then I broke down. The next 48 hours passed in a blur. I woke up, I ate, I drank more beer, and I fell asleep again. I was completely depressed and didn't know what to do. What brought me out of my stupor was a knock on the door at 10 a.m., 2 days after I arrived home. I couldn't go back to the bedroom to sleep, and the spare room was being used as a closet, so I slept on the couch. I woke up to the light coming through the windows and the knocking on the door getting louder. I was hungover and without beer, a bad combination. I was angry when I looked through the peephole and saw my parents there. Crap. I completely forgot to call them when I got back. I had planned to do this until I found Emily and Jim and forgot about everything. I opened the door and saw that Dad had a gloomy expression on his face and Mom was crying. I hugged them both and then retreated when they realized how much I stank. Yes, I hadn't showered since I got back. Okay, Mitchell, go take a shower, Dad ordered me. I nodded and trudged into the bathroom to take care of my hygiene. The hot shower actually made me feel a little better. When I toweled off and put on fresh clothes, I was at least decent looking, albeit with 2 days' worth of stubble on my face. As soon as I left, Dad was the first to start talking. Why didn't you call us when you arrived? He asked irritably. Good to see you too, Dad. Probably because my world came crashing down around me when I caught my bride in bed with a friend, I barked back, not in the mood to be lectured. There were plenty of lectures in college, thank you very much. Now it was Mom's turn to annoy me. Don't call Emily a Mitchell, she reproached me. Mitch, are you sure they did what you thought they did? Yes, Dad. I dragged them both out of here without clothes. By the way, who told you that I'm back? I thought I already knew the answer but was just waiting for confirmation. Emily came and said you kicked her out. She didn't say why, she just said it was a misunderstanding, Mom said. Oh God, I was afraid something like this would happen, she shook her head. There was no misunderstanding about what I saw. And what do you mean, Mom? I asked, suddenly feeling sick to my stomach. From the expression on Dad's face, I realized that this was news to him too. Mom realized what she had just said and turned visibly pale. Sighing humbly, she said, I guess I should tell you, but I saw them together at the mall a little over a year ago. Later that day, I ran into Emily, and she admitted that Jim helped her while you were gone. I didn't know what to do. She begged me to keep it a secret and promised that when you returned, she would stay with Jim. I saw tears in my mother's eyes when she finished telling me this, but at that moment, I had no sympathy for her. So you knew and didn't bother to warn me about it? Thanks, Mom. Thank you so damn much. I screamed at her. Mitch, don't talk to your mother like that, Dad said. You both need to leave now. Please, I'm not in the mood to listen to this nonsense right now, I said softly. Now, most people who know me know that I don't get very angry until I start talking in a barely audible whisper. When I yell, it only makes me moderately angry. When I lower my voice, then I'm ready to commit murder. Okay, we're leaving. I'm sorry, son, my father said, leading my sobbing mother to the door. They closed it behind them, and I threw the bolt again. As soon as I did this, I returned to the living room and screamed in emotional pain. My own mother knew about this and didn't do anything to stop it or even tell me something was going on. How the hell could my own mother not tell me this? How could she side with this traitor instead of her own son? Until that moment, I loved my mother as any son should. She took care of me when I was sick as a child. She healed my skinned knees and other injuries from fights, skateboarding, surfing, or other activities with friends. Until this moment, I would have died for my family, and in particular for my mother. Up until this point, my mother had walked on water, and no one could tell me otherwise. But then I thought the same thing about Emily. It's different, of course, but the level of love in my heart was still the same. Now my heart was breaking twice. How will this betrayal end? I asked myself. I needed to go to an empty apartment. I had to leave there. I couldn't mope and feel sorry for myself forever. I turned on my cell phone and found about 100 voicemails and messages from Emily. I listened to one of the voicemails. She was sobbing and begging me to talk to her. I deleted the rest of the voicemails and unread texts. I turned off the phone again and went to the car. My 79 Z28 had been neglected for too long. I sat down, buckled up, and drove. As I said in Cool Under Fire, I restored this Camaro when I was in high school and have maintained it ever since. One clutch later, and she was still going strong. The engine was perfect, as I serviced it every 6 months and, of course, changed the oil every 3 months. While I was gone, Emily took it to be checked twice and stored gas in it. I told her to add some octane booster to it and drive it every couple of months at least. She did it. I'll have to thank her for this eventually, maybe during my time there. I missed out on my CompTIA certifications while I was away, so I had to recertify in A+, Network Plus, Server Plus, and Security Plus. Yes, I didn't have much time there to keep them updated. I was lucky and was able to audit some classes at a local computer science school in Phoenix, and within 5 months, I was certified again. Once my certifications were up to date, I found a job at a computer repair shop and began trying to get my life back on track. During this time, the calls and messages from Emily finally stopped, and I breathed a sigh of relief. As the week passed in silence, my mother also called me several times to check on how I was doing, but I managed to remain polite to her with difficulty. Yes, my ex-fiancée was a thing of the past, but my mom, even though I didn't like her back then, was still family. My little brother at least stayed away from all this confusion. Dad, on the other hand, always wanted me to patch things up with Mom and wanted me to apologize to her. I told him as diplomatically as possible that it would be a cold day in hell before I apologized to her and that she would have to apologize to me before I talked to her for even more than a few minutes at a time. Yes, she still hasn't apologized to me for covering up Emily's affair with Jim. Hell, every time she tried to explain the situation, I hung up. To hell with this. I don't need an explanation. No explanation can make this acceptable in my opinion. As far as I was concerned, it was just an excuse. It all finally came to a head when I went to my parents' house for Thanksgiving that year, and Emily and her mom were there too. I should have known. I saw them and turned to leave, but Dad intercepted me. Son, you should listen to Emily, at the very least, to give yourself a sense of closure, to find out why she did this, Mom said as Dad blocked my path to the exit. Standard operating procedure dictates that an ambush must be broken through with force. Unfortunately, this does not work in the civilian sector, so I did the civilian equivalent of breaking through an ambush. No, Mom, I don't need to listen to excuses. That's all she has. She was lonely, Jim was there, and she had an affair with a married man. I screamed at everyone, looking straight at Emily. And you shouldn't have told Sherry about this. You ruined their marriage. Mom screamed back. I laughed sharply at this. No, Mom, Jim ruined Jim's marriage. Jim and Emily, not me. Don't even try to make it my fault. Is this what friends should be like? If I ever see him again, he better not run like he did the last time I saw him. Mom, oddly enough, did not respond to this. I think it was the venom in my tone that made her quiet. Emily and her mother looked down as if ashamed. I looked at Emily and addressed her. I had an idea. Emily, do you really want to be with me again, devotedly this time? Oh, did I forget to mention that Sherry kicked Jim out and divorced him? She moved into an apartment 2 doors down from me, and we became friends while receiving benefits. In any case, I had an idea about what to do with Emily. Emily's face brightened, and she looked at me with hope in her eyes. Yes, Mitch, yes. I want to be with you again. I swear that I will never cheat on you again. Please, give me another chance. I nodded. Okay then, so be it. If you accept it, we'll try this, join the army, head overseas, and while you're there, I'll have a year-long affair with Sherry. After declaring my love for you, I will have a night with Sherry whenever we have a free moment. As I spoke, Emily grew paler and paler, and her expression became more distressed. Finally, she began to sob uncontrollably. I'll take that as a no, I said sarcastically, shrugging. Then I softened my tone a little. Do you understand now, Emily? Can you bring me back if I do this? Emily shook her head. No, I can't. Having said this, she ran out of the room, sobbing, and her mother followed right behind her. I looked at my mother. Mom, if Dad did this to you, would you want to know or not? Mom was now crying too, realizing that the situation had changed. I wasn't going to let anyone make me the bad guy. Finally, she said, I'm so sorry, honey. I thought they would stop, but they didn't. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. I thought if I did, you'd get hurt. It didn't occur to me. I should have thought of that. Damn it. I had seen soldiers in my unit receive Dear John letters from their wives or girlfriends and lose their temper after reading them. Some seemed to have lost the will to live, and others were so distracted by patrolling that they stepped on a mine or were ambushed and caught off guard. I sat down heavily on the sofa, shaking all over, and covered my face with my hands. Mom did this to protect me. Damn it, it's my fault for not telling anyone that I was wounded and coming home too. Again, I didn't want them to worry about me. Like I said, I was damn stupid back then. As my friend says, everything happens for a reason. God works in mysterious ways, whatever you call it. As soon as I came to my senses, I hugged my mom, hugged my dad, and hugged my brother Mel, and then left before Emily and her mom returned from wherever they had gone to cry. I told my mom that I understood, but I just couldn't stay there anymore. As soon as I got home, I called Sherry, and she came over. We spent a quiet Thanksgiving together, ordering takeout from FR Marketplace. "How did it go?" she asked after we finished eating. "Actually, better than I thought," I sighed. At least now I understand why Mom didn't tell me about the affair. It made sense too. When I was there, I saw guys die because their wives or girlfriends left them. Sherry nodded. "Okay, I can understand that, but she should have at least told me before I married that idiot." I couldn't agree more with Sherry's anger. "Until a few hours ago, I had the same anger towards my mother," I said. "I understand you." "Wait, did Jim cheat on Emily before you married him?" I asked, amazed. This meant their relationship lasted more than 2 years, not just 1 year as Mom thought and as Emily had told her. Sherry nodded. "Jim admitted it in family therapy." "Ugh, I just wanted him to leave, but the judge wanted it," she said, rolling her eyes. "Well, I'm just glad I didn't marry her." No offense to those who are married, I half smiled at her. "There's no messy divorce to deal with." Sherry responded with a grin. "No hard feelings, dear. What do you want to do now that we have no food left?" From the expression on her face, I knew what she wanted. "I don't mind if that's what you mean," I said with a smile. "Great, because that's what I need," she confirmed. It was an unforgettable night. We had a night from about 6:30 p.m. until midnight, when fatigue finally overcame both of us. However, I missed Lena. Every time I picked up the phone to call her, I cursed myself and put it back. Her last words kept swirling around in my head, and I was a complete fool for just hanging up. Then life, as it was, went on. I worked, I ate, I drank, I slept. Yes, I survived. The pain and anger cooled over time, of course. Damn, that was the longest I've ever held a grudge. No, I didn't go back to Emily. I have some self-respect, thanks in part to Sherry. I am proud of myself for never giving in, even at my lowest point, to Emily's pleas to let her back into my life. This won't happen. I remembered the good advice I received about how to deal with cheaters. Go away, and don't look back. I remembered the good times with Emily, of course, but as I said earlier, the warning signs were there. She was possessive, she wanted to control me. She couldn't stay faithful to me. Based on the latest evidence, she is a selfish woman. To hell with her. I didn't love her anymore, but I didn't hate her either, just indifferent. Sherry then received a much better job offer in Albuquerque, New Mexico. After I helped her move in over the long weekend, we spent one last night together before going our separate ways. It was fun, energetic, and damn, Sherry was amazing in bed. She had come a long way since we first got together after her divorce was finalized. But when I returned to Tempe after a day of driving, the morning after our last time together, I found myself in the same rut as before. Only this time, Sherry had moved on, and most of the women I tried to meet were looking for something more than a friendship-style relationship, which I wasn't ready for. Honestly, I have to admit that I no longer trusted women with anything, even understanding why Mom kept Emily's affair a secret. It would be a long time before I could trust her again, if ever. Several years passed, and life went on. The survival continued. I fell into a work-eat-sleep rut: get up, eat, go to work, have lunch, come home, have dinner. I provided jobs for all the staff at Carl's J and Burger King. Yes, I can cook, I just didn't have the motivation to cook my own food. I still played sports every morning before work. I ran, did 100 push-ups, sit-ups, and ran a couple of miles. Until one morning, I lost motivation. Damn, I'm depressed again. Simply put, I desperately needed to have an intimate. I also started smoking. Yes, I know smoking sucks. I knew this before, but my self-esteem was so low at the time that I didn't care. One Saturday, I was thinking about Lena at home. Yes, I still considered Santa Barbara home. That's where I grew up for my first 5 years before my dad returned to the military and where I went to high school after they left. Lena also studied there. Most of my fond memories had their roots there. I picked up the phone to call her, praying she still had the same number. It wouldn't surprise me if she had a new phone. I had a new phone, but I didn't send her my new number. Stupid of me, I know, but then perhaps it was stupid to write down her number on my new phone. But before we broke up, we were best friends for 25 years. We had known each other practically all our lives. As I was about to dial her number, perhaps expecting her to hang up as soon as she heard my voice, someone knocked on the door. I breathed a sigh of relief at being temporarily freed from something I would probably have to deal with and opened the door with gratitude. I must have stood there for a minute with my mouth open, looking at the slightly aged but still beautiful face of my best friend. She grinned with a sparkle in her eyes as she looked at me. I was a little thinner than the last time she saw me, as I had not exercised as intensely as before. "Lena, what the hell are you doing here?" I asked, perplexed. "This is a visit from your best friend." "Aren't you going to invite me in?" she said, and her smirk didn't disappear. To say I was stunned is an understatement. I stepped back without a word, allowing her to enter. She came in and hugged me tightly as she closed the door behind her. Reflexively, I hugged her back tightly. I felt my body react to her touch, even feeling deeply relieved to see her again. She kept in good shape, unlike me. Her petite 5 feet 4 inches frame was still in great shape, soft in all the right places. "Well, someone's happy to see me," she said with a giggle. "We're both glad," I replied with a relieved laugh. "Shoo, darling," she said, and pulled away from the hug. She stood on her tiptoes to kiss me with her full lips. "How?" I asked as she pulled away from the kiss with a smile on her lips. She saw my puzzled face. I had a million questions for her, but at that moment I couldn't ask a single one. How did she find me? I wasn't on the list. Why was she here? She made it clear 10 years ago that she never wanted to talk to me again if I decided to join the military again. Where was she now? Did she move here? "I need to ask you why," she said, her face becoming serious as she stepped back and slapped me across the face. "Why haven't you called me once in 10 years to let me know that you're alive?" I was stunned again, not only by the blow, which stung, but also by her tone. There was more relief and fear in her voice than anger. "I thought you never wanted to talk to me again," I replied. That was the only thing I could think to say. "I didn't mean never, Mitch. I meant, come on." "Oh my God, we're best friends, you idiot," she screamed at me and then burst into tears and hugged me tightly again. "You should have called me." "I'm sorry, Lena." "God, I'm so sorry," I said, tears streaming down my face in response to her tears. I looked into her dark eyes and saw pain there. Her face softened and she smiled again, pulling me towards her and holding me tightly. I missed having her in my life, being able to talk to her and listen to her advice on any situation. I led her into the living room, and we sat down on the sofa together. After we were seated, I was finally able to ask a few questions. "Lena, how did you find me?" I asked. "So you didn't even know my address here after I moved?" "Thank your mother for that, dear," she replied with a smile. "She called me last week and told me about your situation and how you barely take care of yourself now." It made sense. Mom knew that I still barely trusted her after she had Emily and Jim's affair from me. I couldn't help but laugh. "Now that makes sense," I said. "She's still trying to get back on my good side for not telling me about Emily and Jim when she found out a year before I did." To my surprise, Lena simply nodded. "Yes, she told me about it too. I understand why she did it. You would have died there if she told you." "Damn, honey, if you had died there, I would never have been able to tell you how sorry I am I didn't support you more." "What?" I asked, even more shocked. "A year after you returned to the army, I talked to my dad about it. He said that you should have done what you had to do and I should have supported you more. I shouldn't have cut you out of my life this way," she said. I would have called you if I had your new number, but you never called me. I blamed myself for how our last conversation ended. Damn it, Mitch, I'm so sorry. Tears started streaming down her face again, and my tears could barely be held back. Instead of saying anything, I just pulled her towards me and hugged her tightly. We spent 3 hours sharing what had happened to me in Afghanistan and Iraq and what I went through when I returned home. Lena's story was interesting. After several years as a patrol officer for the Santa Barbara Police, she transferred to the Los Angeles Police Department and became a detective. She was forced out of the LAPD a few years later for using excessive force while apprehending a suspect and began putting her criminology degree to use by working at a Santa Barbara law firm as a paralegal. She was also planning to go to law school. Working at a law firm gave her a good understanding of the law, so she expected law school to be easy. I will never speak legal language. I always found the ambiguity in it to be overly tedious and just plain stupid. Just say what you mean. I also don't usually like lawyers, but I couldn't blame Lena for choosing to specialize in law. This is a noble calling for a lawyer. Then I took out a pack of Marlboros. I quickly became hooked on them over the past 2 years. My workouts suffered, but thanks to my fast metabolism, I just lost weight, not gained it. I was no longer as strong as the last time Lena saw me. Damn, when did you start smoking? She exclaimed. A couple of years ago. Why? I know we promised each other we wouldn't, but 2 years ago we weren't even talking. I was stressed, and a guy I knew gave me a cigarette. I shrugged in response. She snatched the pack from my hand and threw it into the trash. Don't smoke anymore, she said decisively. The first thing we need to do is get you rid of this crap. At that moment, I was unemployed. The computer store I worked at had closed down, so I was receiving unemployment benefits after I was laid off, but that was all I had. I was struggling to make ends meet, and the job market did not offer good opportunities. Oh, so how am I supposed to afford a Band-Aid? I snorted. Lena, I'm not the same guy I was before Emily betrayed me. I used to trust people, then the woman I loved ripped my heart out. Lena just looked at me. Are you really that tight, Mitch? She asked. Listen, I'm alone now, you're alone now. Got it? I think we should give ourselves another chance. That whole friendship thing was a good idea when we were younger, but now, the look Lena gave me said it all. As I looked into her eyes, I realized it's been a year since I had a night. There was only one problem. I see what you mean, dear, I said with a sigh. But the thing is, I'm not looking for a relationship. I mean, I love you and you know it. The thing is, I don't want to be in a situation again where I give my heart to someone and she tramples on it. I saw the shock on her face, followed by anger. I can't believe what you're thinking. You think I would do to you what she did? Do you really think I would do that to you, Mitchell? I love you, you fool. Her words made me stop and look at my best friend as if for the first time. I had seen different sides of her personality, but never like this. I saw a loving and caring side, a tough and unyielding side, and a hurt and angry side. But it was all of these things together, if that makes sense. She was hurt, angry, tough, but still caring and loving. Even when she screamed at me, she conveyed her message through my thick skull. You're right, Lena, I said, realizing that this beautiful woman was always right in front of me, not just physically beautiful, but also beautiful inside. I literally never thought we could be more than just best friends. God, what a fool I was. She reached out and stroked my cheek, and suddenly it was as if the years had receded. When I took her into my arms and kissed her lips, I was in love with Emily, but now I was in love again, and perhaps always had been in love with Lena. Capital letters matter, take my word for it. She kissed me back, and her lips parted from mine as our tongues danced slowly in each other's mouths. It had been too long since I held her, too long since I kissed her, and too long since I felt her body pressed against mine. I was engrossed in her presence as we kissed. Her sensuality and intimacy filled the room, and I lost myself in her touch. When we finally broke the kiss, I stood up silently and helped her to her feet. She smiled as I led her to my bedroom. Well, I did get some more love from Lena, and by the time we were done that night, we were both absolutely exhausted. We fell asleep in each other's arms for the first time in over 12 years. The next morning, we talked a lot about where we were going. She wanted to be with me, and I wanted to be with her. There were some logistical issues that needed to be resolved, of course. Would she move here? Would I move there? Honestly, I'm dead tired of the Phoenix area and its scorching summers. The winters there were wonderful, but the summers were simply too hot. So I asked her about job opportunities in Santa Barbara. She made me take out my laptop, and we looked on Bing. Indeed, there were quite a few job opportunities available in Santa Barbara and Ventura, so I filled out a few applications while we sat there. By the end of the week, I had a response to an email about a job at a data entry firm in Santa Barbara, and I called them to see if I could schedule an interview for the following week. Lena went with me to Emily, as Mom and Dad still wanted, so that I could find closure with her. She dated guys from time to time, not that I cared, but for some reason, she refused to really move on until she talked to me. Since I didn't hate her anymore, I finally shrugged and said, okay. When Lena and I arrived, she just stood next to me while I listened. Well, I wasn't really listening. All I heard from Emily was blah 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 blah, and so on, but I nodded where it seemed appropriate. When she finally finished talking, like the teacher in the Peanuts cartoons, I said, okay, Emily, you can move on now. Find a guy you can love and be faithful to, and I wish you luck. I even let her hug me. When we went outside, I looked at Lena and asked, did you understand anything of what she said? Lena laughed and rolled her eyes. Unfortunately, you must have been ignoring her. Yeah, guilty. I was listening to Metallica in my head while she was talking. Was it something important? I asked. No, she shrugged. We both laughed as we walked to my car. And Jim, I haven't seen him since the day I threw him out of my apartment. He never tried to contact me. He didn't even threaten me after I told his wife about his affair with my ex-fiancée. Last I heard of him, he had moved back east to somewhere. I don't care what he does with his life now. Jim is not important at all. He always had an inflated ego, and it cost him one of his best friends and a wonderful wife. I took Lena to the airport on Friday and promised to be there on Sunday evening. Lena had already told me that I could pack my things and stay at her apartment, so I packed all the necessary things, including my PS3 and Xbox 360, and canceled the apartment rental. I lost my deposit, but that was okay. I said to hell with it, packed my things, loaded up my car, and left. I had $1,300 in my pocket for gas and food. This was enough for my trip. I had a cooler in the passenger seat filled with bottles of Gatorade and my PSP connected to the stereo via a cassette deck adapter for audio and a cigarette lighter power adapter to keep it running. I rarely listened to the radio while driving, but when I left the complex, I had the radio on instead of the PSP. I decided to listen to it a little more since I couldn't bear to listen to the PSP anymore. I smiled as I pulled onto I-10 West, and the most appropriate song imaginable came on the radio. Marilyn Manson isn't my favorite artist, but he knew exactly what he was singing about when he performed Long Hard Road Out of Hell. I sang along with him, and after the song ended, I turned on my PSP and listened to other metal until I left, feeling with a smile on my face as I drove towards my future, the future that Lena and I are building together. What do you think of our story today? I thought it was quite short, but the plot that was in the story was very interesting. What's your opinion? Write it in the comments. See you in the comments.